Not too long ago, we had the Olympic Games, and yet somehow the biggest story and controversy that came out of the whole event was a complete non-issue about something not happening. Yes, there was an entire media firestorm led by prominent figures such as Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and J.K. Rowling over whether two boxers, especially the Algerian Imani Khalif, are actually men dominating in the female competition. Suddenly, all the most reactionary people in existence are the new champions of women's rights.
These radical trans activists and those who support them are not going to be happy until a woman is dead. These poor women are being fed like lambs to the slaughter.
Again, it is up for a society to prevent the abuse of women, but we don't do that anymore, and we haven't for quite some time.
Meanwhile, do you remember all the feminists who gleefully announced that they'd rather meet a bear in the woods than a man just by virtue of his biological sex? Those same people now insist that actually estrogen completely neutralizes all physical advantages biological males have, and probably the natural male urge to rape women and do patriarchy or something. Now, I'm not a reactionary or a feminist, but I'm not some sort of enlightened centrist either. There's no middle ground on these issues, so I'm just gonna declare the straight truth about everything involving women's sports. Their pay, trans participation, everything. I'd be surprised if a single person agreed with all of what I'm about to say, so be sure to give this video a dislike, unsubscribe, and report this video for hate speech. Alright, let's start with the conservatives. These two women won their respective weight classes in boxing and were accused of actually being men.
They want to have men playing in women's sports. You saw the boxer today, the Italian female boxer, because she got hit so hard. She said, I've never been hit like that before. There will be no men playing in women's sports when we're elected.
Now, I will admit Lin Yuting does look kind of like a man, but you see, you made a fatal error. You clocked her the wrong way. She looks more like a trans man than a trans woman. Trans women don't go taking all that estrogen in an attempt to pass as female only to retain the short haircut. Of course, there's a reason conservatives don't even consider the opposite case, and that's because they forgot trans men existed. The idea any woman would ever voluntarily become a man is completely foreign to me. I mean them. Fair enough, but I don't really see what they were talking about when they harassed Khalif. She doesn't really look like anything in particular to me. Actually, for some reason, she looks more trans feminine to me after her makeover. But enough with the physiognomy. Let's just clear this up, okay? Neither of them are men. We even have a totally real and not fake picture of Khalif as a young girl, and even then she was being she actually looked like a girl. There is still yet to be any published evidence that any of the athletes have any genetic or hormonal abnormalities beyond what you generally get with high-level athletes. And it's not even possible to change your gender or be openly trans in a shithole country like Algeria. In fact, even being suspected of homosexuality there can get you murdered to death. So, a trans woman competing for Algeria? In the words of a wise man,
they might as well hold up signs saying chickens for KFC.
So, speaking of that guy, Benjamin Netanyahu, it reminds me of an Olympics issue, which seems just a little bit more pertinent than trans women not competing in a sport nobody actually watched. Russia and Belarus are still banned from the Olympics due to their invasion of Ukraine, breaking the Olympic truce. So you'd think people would pay more attention to the Olympic Committee's inaction regarding the very real situation in Gaza, whether they're pro-genocide or anti-genocide. But no, let's focus on trans people, even though they've been allowed to compete in the Olympics since 2004, and only one transgender athlete has ever won gold. Oh yeah, and they was also born female but identifies as non-binary. So, between you and me, let's just be honest here. Nobody cares about women's sports. I don't care about sports in general, and the reactionaries creating this moral panic don't care about real issues that affect real people. They just hate trans people, but for all the wrong reasons. But enough about them. Let's just turn away from the practical stuff for a bit and talk about all those theoretical advantages everyone's been blabbing about. For all my trans-inclusive friends who think trans women magically lose all of their advantages after getting on estrogen for 2 seconds, I'm here to inform you that your arguments are bad and you should feel bad. Let's skip the studies about muscle mass and grip strength for a second and just talk about plain observable reality. You see these guys? These are professional basketball players. They are tall. Now, a person who's gone through male puberty will be about 6 inches taller than if that same person had gone through female puberty. And in basketball, that's easily enough to make the difference between a star player and a defensive liability. So unless female puberty introduces some mysteriously and previously unknown counter advantage that evens the odds, I'm pretty damn sure that, all else being equal, being a post-puberty transitioner is a pretty big advantage in at least one sport. Seriously, it's like all these feminists sitting in their vegan synthetic ivory towers scrutinizing every second word of the cast report haven't watched a single NBA game all their life. Not that that's a bad thing, but my point is that if you really think post-puberty trans women don't have any significant athletic advantage, you are delusional. Fucking delusional. But don't spend all your effort debating a losing point. If you want to build a good argument that trans women should be allowed in women's sports, you can still do it. There's this weird misconception among basically all of the American populace that sports is all about skill or hard work or something, but that's only one piece of the puzzle. From a societal point of view, it really doesn't matter who does the thing and wins the points. The real value that high-level athletes bring to the table is in entertainment and inspiration. We want to see amazing feats of strength and skill that most of us can only dream of, like a pole vaulter getting so high up in the air only to hit the bar with his giant dick. It may excite national pride to see your countryman dunking on LeBron James, or disappoint to see your finest chess masters invariably lose to some asshole from Norway. But you also want to encourage physical and mental fitness amongst the populace. Competition and entertainment is only the delivery mechanism to promote an active and healthy population. And that's why you need women's leagues and Paralympics and stuff like that, targeted at large populations who can't always connect to the male freaks of nature who represent the best of the best. If you recognize that pure competitive prowess is one of many factors in this equation, you have to balance those values against each other when they conflict. And if you think queer people should have a place in and be represented in public life, and not all of us do, then we have to make some reasonable accommodations to ensure trans people can compete. It's perfectly reasonable to call for better oversight and stricter regulations of hormone levels and such, but if your position is simply that trans people should compete in their biological category, except trans men also can't take testosterone because that would be doping, you might as well just say that trans people are degenerate and shouldn't be allowed to play sports. And this is what's so ridiculous about the reactionary belief that protecting women's sports means focusing only on fair competition. If you don't believe in accommodation, you fundamentally don't believe in women's sports at all. Because let's face it, women are bad at most sports, and the only reason they can make any money at all is because we carved out an exception for them. And this is where I turn to the feminists who keep shrieking about equal pay because you guys are hysterical. The figurehead of the recent movement for equal pay in sports has to be the US women's national soccer team. Until they got a nominally equal pay deal in 2022, they loved nothing more than to make fun of how bad the men's national team is.
You need to understand that the men made it to the round of 16 in the World Cup.
Well, we've won 3 World Cups.
Well, they are ranked 30th in the world.
We're ranked number 1.
They play with so much passion.
We have 4 Olympic gold medals.
Of course, they're right. The men's national team hasn't been very good on account of its, playing against other men's teams. I, too, can be very good in a league that adjusts away all my competition's biological advantages. It doesn't matter that the women's national basketball team has an Olympic gold streak longer than the men's team. Very few people actually think they should be paid the same, because it's strikingly obvious that, like me, they can't fucking dunk. Well, what other reasons could women have for wanting equal pay? How about revenue? Well, there's some more bad news. The FIFA 2022 World Cup generated over $6 billion in revenue, whereas the Women's World Cup generated just $570 million. As a percentage of the total revenue, the women's prize pool was nearly triple that of the men's. It's completely lopsided in the opposite direction. Domestically, Major League Soccer has been profitable for around 20 years, while the National Women's Soccer League is... well, they're working on it. Of course, there's the argument that the unprofitability of women's sports is itself an artifact of patriarchy. After all, even in a game like chess, where women are ostensibly capable of becoming just as skilled as men, even the strongest semi-active woman falls outside the top 100, and there's a long drop to second place. This may suggest that given the right environment and financial resources, women's sports could become just as profitable as men's. Certainly, you could try to justify an affirmative action program with the knowledge that the earnings potential is higher than it is now. But there's some problems with this argument. The first is that feminists present equal pay for unequal work as something women inherently deserve, not an accommodation made on their behalf. Secondly, they still haven't proven we should go so far as to completely and forcibly equalize pay, potentially decades before the market can justify it. Most importantly, the whole argument relies on a premise which is completely conjectural if not unfalsifiable. The idea that for every sport, the quote-unquote natural market wage provides complete gender equality regardless of any skill differences is provably incorrect. After all, you'd have to explain why there are already some sports where women are as prominent as men, if not more. Gymnastics comes to mind. Everyone knows Simone Biles, but does anyone know who Brody Malone is? Well, I sure don't, and that's not Brody Malone. I just made that name up. When you Google gymnastics, all you get is the women. And it's not just gymnastics. Other sports where women do well include volleyball, tennis, and figure skating. Now, what do these sports all have in common which give women a competitive edge? It's personality. See, the NFL really only works for men because when everyone's face is hidden behind a helmet, you can't really care about much other than raw strength and skill. But with these other sports, women's faces and personalities get to shine through, and I'm just fucking with you. It's the ass and the thighs, okay? Women will still watch men's sports for the athletic prowess, but the way to get men to watch women's sports is by turning up the sex appeal. Now, you may not like that fact. Perhaps you think men being attracted to attractive women is sexist, but the fact is that feminists only care about the pay gap in sports when it favors men, and when it favors women, then they complain that nobody's paying attention to their skills. Don't blame me, I don't care about anyone's skills, and if I had my way, all Olympic events would be done in the traditional way, if you know what I mean. Also, that gymnast is actually called Brody Malone. Fake ass name. I'm gonna wrap up by bringing us back to the non-comprehensive list of values I wrote out earlier. It's these considerations that lead me to the conclusions I have, not some vague notions of fairness or inclusion that characterizes most debates on these subjects. Yes, women obviously aren't as fast or strong as men, and obviously some transgender women retain some physiological advantages from male puberty. At the same time, women sometimes need that extra push to find professional success where men might find a friendlier market, and doing so can create positive externalities in the form of a more healthy society. Similar accommodations might be made for transgender people, but it's up to us to find the right synthesis based on continuing research. I also want to clarify that even though I tackled these two issues together, I'm not suggesting that they're analogous in all ways. Yes, they're both ridiculous, but transgender people in sports, as of now, affects a small group of people in a very significant way, whereas the negative effects of forcing pay equality are rather abstract and diffused across an entire industry. Not that it matters, because the finer details are probably already lost on all of you who think I'm completely wrong about everything. I'm sure you'll let me know in the comments, assuming you even see this after I posted it so late.